This is part 2 of changing the salon carpet to hardwood. And I'll go over some of the things that I did and that could have been done better and so forth. Because of the coronavirus problem that we got right now, I wasn't able to get out and get the exact materials I wanted, so I sort of made do. But there are easier ways to do this than what I did, and I'll outline those things. So here is what the system looked like originally, and with the carpeting, and here's what it looks like now with the hardwood installed. The couch is at a bit of an angle, and that wasn't apparent when the carpet was in, but it was some RV specialist that put this thing in, and they never bothered to line it up properly. So that's easily changed. I'll do it when I get a few minutes. It just unbolts from the floor and then rebolts back in again. The place that I left it at last time was where I had cut the hardwood that had been mounted on the floor in a square, and then was waiting for a router bit. So I got that. It's a slot cutter bit with a flat bottom on it, and that's required in order to route the edges of the hardwood when it's mounted on the floor. Now, if you did this straight, you wouldn't have these problems, and you could come up with a very nice looking floor. I had the time, the tools, and the inclination to do it this way, but it would look very good if it was just straight from side to side, and you wouldn't have as much of this special fitting to do. So what you can see here is just once the slot was cut, I glued some splines into the slot in order to hold the piece that would go into that, which was the border that goes around. So what I did was, when the salon portion was finished, this is sort of part 2, is I took the carpeting out of the front. That in itself was a bit of a chore. It was nothing exotic, but the easiest way to do it, of course, is to remove the seats. That's simple to do. There's just 4 bolts. And then to pull up all of the carpeting. And what they do with this when they build it, at least in this motorhome, is they put carpet front to back, and then they build everything on top of the carpet. That includes like the whole front console system, the cabinets at the side, everything. It's all mounted on these on the floor once it's been tacked down. And I guess it's just fast to do it that way. Just roll it out, tack it down, it's done. But getting it up is a problem. So I had to actually lift up that front dash assembly in order to pull enough of the carpet out so I could slide the wood and so forth in, and then go through and clean it all up. And that's what you see in these pictures here. It's not difficult. It's just be prepared for, it's a bit of a nasty job. So once it's all up and ready to go, the next part of this was to lay out the wood patterns at the front. And to do that, I cut them to size, and then I took a picture and just went over it with one of the, an app, and drew onto the picture numbers for the wood, and then numbered each of the pieces. Because once you pull it all up, it's like a puzzle. You can't figure out where it all goes back again. At least I couldn't. So that's what you see in this picture. Once that was done, it was all nailed in place, and I put a bit of a pattern into the front there. What you can see is the entranceway, and that's a steel plate. That goes over top of the sliding plate that comes out, and I had to drill through that to be able to hook the flooring onto that. So the idea here is that what will be put down here is a rubberized material, and this is where a lot of work is, and I can show you a much faster, easier way to do, and a better way to do it, of course, now that it's all done. And this picture simply looks backwards to seeing the floor from the front entrance. And then another picture from the back to the front again. So what had to be done here, and this is what took the time, is a template had to be made for that front portion. First cardboard was used to get the general layout sizes and so forth, and then I took a 3/8 inch piece of plywood, and the fastest way to do this was to cut each individual bend and cut in it, and then fit that together against the previous piece, just like a puzzle. Trying to do the measurements, get it all cut to the right size and get it to fit exactly was, for me at least, impossible. So this is how I did it. Then I went over and screwed these pieces together into a plate, and took the plate all apart and used that as the template to be able to cut the rubber. So you can see it here once it's all assembled and it's pulled out of the motorhome, put back together again. and here it is sitting on top of the rubber. Now I just used what I had available, and here's where you could do a lot better than what I did. I had some 1/8 inch rubber matting that I was going to use for soundproofing in my truck. Because of this virus mess, we couldn't get out to go anywhere to get something better, so I used what I had. This is very heavy rubber, and it marks easily, but it does serve as the purpose that I wanted it to do, which was to be able to be an entrance point to the hardwood so people can take their shoes off, it won't get scratched, and that's where a lot of the traffic is when you're driving, obviously. So I laid it on here, then put down tape underneath the template that I built, marked that all out, then cut the rubber to match, and then when that was done, because this is 3/8 but it's a 3/4 inch lift from the floor to the top of the hardwood, I had to get, and I could buy it local here at the building center, I got a 5/8 inch piece of plywood, and then the 5/8 plus the 1/8, of course that's 3/4, it should line up without a transition point, which it did, but it was a lot of extra work. So that was all laid out on the plywood here, cut to fit, and then what was done next was to put the 5/8 inch plywood down on the floor with screw it down in exactly the same pattern so it matched up, which was not hard to do, just using regular screws. Yeah, I had to drill it at the front through that metal plate. That was a bit of a pain, and also lift up that ridiculous dash there in order to slide the plywood underneath it. But having done all of that, it was all ready to go. Then the next thing to do was to put down the rubber mat that I'd cut, and I glued that at the front, and I put weights of like blocks on it with contact cement to hold it down. But getting it to line up perfectly, which it had to do to make this transition look as effective as possible, was extremely difficult to do. Now here's the better way to do it. Instead of going through this whole mess with plywood, if you wanted to put this at the front, buy a styrofoam sheet. It's 4x8 or whatever. They make different thicknesses of this stuff as insulation under floors for concrete, and it's extremely light and it's inexpensive. That would have made the perfect template to put down and then put rubber over top, or at least do that for the template, then go and buy foam instead of rubber. Rubber is extremely heavy. Like a roll of this stuff, 4x8, 3/4 of an inch, is about 150 pounds. That's not what I use, but that's what was available if you use rubber. But you can get a hard foam like in a gym system. And I think Home Depot sells one of these that have interlocking ways to put this together. So you could buy that, put it into sections, and use the template, and it would work perfectly. Plus it would be a nice cushiony effect. But anyway, this is what I did, and this is the end result of it here. It looks pretty good. At the front, we'll put down a mat anyway. The stairwell isn't complete yet, but all of the work underneath the driver's area and so forth, that's all finished. So you can see it here at a different place now. The front little cabinet or whatever I refinished, put trim all around that and around the edges there. And here it is a little bit more of a close-up. So it worked quite well, but it was a great deal of work. And most of the work was because of not having the correct materials and just sort of being stubborn and going ahead and doing it anyway. But there wasn't any option. I mean, otherwise leave the thing undone. So that's it. It wasn't difficult to do. It just was a bit time-consuming. Now the pedal at the front, which is the gas pedal, is not mounted. That just screws into the floor. It's just really a big resistor, rheostat on a treadle. So that goes in, and the brake isn't mounted yet, but it's all done. Now I think somebody had this thing apart before, because the boot that goes around the steering column overlaps the boot that's for the brake pedal. I mean, I would guess that if this was done properly, they should not one sit on top of the other. So that took a bit of manipulating to get it to fit in there properly. This is a picture of the chair. So to put the chair and its steel bottom onto the wood and not have it slide around or scratch things, I put the sort of a plastic that you use to wrap heat pipes in, or to wrap copper pipes in, or whatever kind of pipes to keep them from freezing. You get it at Home Depot. It's like very, very cheap, just with some tie wraps. So that sits on the floor and it works quite well. It doesn't slide around and it doesn't mark anything, and it's just not noticeable that it's there. The one thing that I haven't finished on here that'll be done some other point is the stairwell. I was originally going to put wood along the side. I'm not going to do that now, but around the front facing of it I will do. I've ordered wood that's thinner wood for the bathroom and shower area. I'm going to replace the ceiling in that area because it's crumpled and it was a mess, and etc. So there's enough wood that left over. I'll put that along the front face. So when I do that portion, I'll do another project presentation, and if you're interested, that'll be something you can look into. Thank you.